The first suitcase appeared beneath my bed before sunrise. By the third morning, one of them contained photographs of me sleeping in the room. My name is Martin Ellison. I was 36 when I checked into Mini Glacier Hotel in Montana after 5 days photographing wolves and mountain goats in Glacier National Park. I had spent most of the week alone in cold rain, and the hotel felt almost luxurious after sleeping in a tent. A front desk clerk named Rebecca Lane handed me the key to room 214. "The East Wing is quiet this time of year," she said. "That sounds perfect." She hesitated before adding, "Call the desk if you hear anyone moving into the empty rooms." I assumed she meant maintenance staff. The hotel smelled of old timber, furniture polish, and smoke from the enormous fireplace in the lobby. Wind pressed against the outer walls, making the building release long wooden groans. Somewhere below, piano music drifted through the lobby, soft and slightly out of tune. My room overlooked the dark lake. I locked the door, placed my camera bag on a chair, and fell asleep almost immediately. At dawn, something scraped beneath the bed. The sound was slow and heavy, like leather dragging across rough floorboards. I knelt and found an old brown suitcase. It was not mine. The brass latches opened easily. Inside were folded shirts, a shaving brush, several black and white photographs, and a hotel receipt dated 1937. The guest's name was Arthur Bell. One photograph showed Arthur standing outside the hotel with his wife. Another showed room 214. In the final image, Arthur stood beside the bed. A suitcase rested beneath it. I carried everything to the front desk. Rebecca became pale when she saw the receipt. "There is no record of anyone checking out under that name," she said. "Then someone placed it in my room." She checked the lock history. No one had entered after me. A maintenance supervisor named Harold Price searched the room. He was older, broad-shouldered, and impatient with anything he could not repair. "Old hotel," he said. "Strange storage spaces. There is no storage space beneath the bed." He looked anyway. The floor was solid. That night, a door opened across the hallway. Room 213 had been empty earlier. Warm light spilled beneath it. I heard several people speaking inside. Glasses touched together, followed by quiet laughter and the soft turning of a radio dial. I called the front desk. Rebecca answered. "No guest is registered in that room." While we spoke, a woman stepped into the hallway. She wore a red dress and carried a silver cigarette case. Her hair and makeup belonged to another era. She smiled at me. "Arthur is waiting." Then she returned to the room. The door closed without making a sound. Rebecca arrived minutes later. Room 213 was locked. When she opened it, the interior was dark, cold, and empty. Dust covered the furniture. No footprints crossed the floor. The second suitcase appeared beneath my bed the following morning. It was blue, with airline stickers from the 1960s. Inside were a woman's clothes, a camera, and a journal belonging to Evelyn Moore. The final entry described hearing a party in an empty room. She wrote that the guests had invited her to remain after checkout. The last page contained only one sentence. "They need someone in every room before the hotel can close." I decided to leave. A storm had blocked the mountain road. Rebecca told me maintenance crews would reopen it by morning. I moved to a room near the lobby. At midnight, doors began opening throughout the East Wing. Each one released a different sound. Dance music from the 1940s. A child crying. A man coughing violently. Suitcase wheels rolling over carpet. The noises overlapped until the hallway sounded crowded, yet no footsteps approached the lobby. Harold joined Rebecca and me near the staircase. "I checked those rooms," he said. "They are empty." Then an elevator bell rang. The hotel elevator had been out of service for years. The doors opened. A dozen guests stood inside. Their clothing came from different decades. Some looked perfectly healthy. Others appeared burned, soaked, or bruised. Every one held a room key. Arthur Bell stood at the front. "You found our luggage," he said. I backed away. "What happened to you?" "We stayed too long. The lobby changed around us. The polished floor became worn and stained. Wallpaper peeled from the walls. Snow blew through broken windows, although rain still struck the modern glass. Guests began descending the staircase. More appeared on every landing. Some smiled politely. Others stared with hollow exhaustion. Rebecca whispered, "This is not the hotel." Arthur looked at her. "It is every night the hotel has kept." A suitcase appeared beside my feet. It was my own. I had left it in my vehicle. Inside were my clothes, camera equipment, passport, and a checkout receipt dated the following morning. The receipt listed my status as unclaimed. Then I saw the photographs. They showed me entering room after room. In the final image, I stood behind the front desk wearing an old hotel uniform. Rebecca and Harold were seated in the lobby among the dead guests. Arthur extended a key. "Room 215. "There is no room 215, Rebecca said. A door appeared at the end of the hallway. Behind it, someone used my voice to call for help. I moved toward it before Rebecca seized my arm. That is what it wants. The hotel lights failed. Suitcases opened all around us. Metal latches released in rapid succession, followed by hundreds of breaths from inside the cases. Hands reached from the darkness. Harold swung a fire axe through the nearest suitcase. It split open, releasing a blast of freezing air and a woman's scream. Rebecca pulled the fire alarm. The bell produced a harsh mechanical ringing that shook the lobby. The dead guests covered their ears. Arthur shouted, "The hotel is sleeping." I grabbed my camera and triggered the flash repeatedly. Each burst revealed the lobby in two versions, modern and ruined, occupied and empty, alive and dead. The ghosts flickered with every flash. Harold smashed the elevator controls. Rebecca kept the alarm ringing. The doorway to room 215 began closing. I threw my suitcase inside before it shut. The entire hotel groaned like a ship twisting in deep water. Then every ghost vanished. Morning sunlight filled the lobby. The road reopened an hour later. Rebecca and Harold remembered the storm, but not the guests. Hotel records showed no room 215 and no employees named Rebecca Lane or Harold Price. Both had disappeared from the hotel in 1986. I found their photographs in an old staff display before leaving. I no longer stay in historic hotels. Last night, a suitcase scraped slowly from beneath my bed. Inside was a room, key marked 215. Behind it lay a fresh photograph of the Mini Glacier Hotel, and every window was occupied except the one waiting for me. Story 2. The old keeper poured me coffee every evening, even though the tower had been empty for more than 50 years. On my final night, something below the lookout began calling in my mother's voice, and the old man begged me not to answer. My name is Nathan Cole. I was 34 when I volunteered for wildfire observation work in Bitterroot National Forest, Montana. I had recently left a construction job after injuring my shoulder, and I wanted temporary work that felt useful without requiring heavy lifting. Supervisor Laura Bennett assigned me to inspect an abandoned fire lookout on Granite Ridge. "The tower is structurally sound," she said. "Check the windows, test the lightning protection, and document anything damaged." "How long has it been empty?" "A long time." She handed me a radio and looked toward the ridge. "Return before the weekend." The hike took most of the afternoon. Dry grass brushed against my boots, and wind moved through the pines with a low, restless hiss. The air smelled of dust, warm bark, and distant smoke from controlled burns. The tower stood above the forest on rusted metal legs. Its wooden steps creaked beneath me, each sound traveling down through the structure. Someone was already inside. He was an elderly man with a gray beard, faded ranger shirt, and deep burn scars along one hand. A metal coffee pot steamed on the stove. "You must be Nathan," he said. I stopped in the doorway. "Who are you?" "Elias Mercer, evening lookout." Laura had never mentioned another volunteer. Elias handed me a cup. The coffee was hot, bitter, and fresh. He pointed through the western windows. "Smoke column near the northern drainage. It will disappear after sunset." I saw a thin gray line rising above the trees. Elias predicted the wind change, the evening temperature, and the arrival of rain shortly after midnight. Every detail proved accurate. Before darkness settled, he turned off the radio. Communication does not work properly after sunset. The signal is strong. It is not the signal you should worry about. He warned me never to answer anyone calling from below. Animals. Elias looked toward the forest. They begin with animals. That night, wind pushed against the tower, making the windows tremble in their frames. Rain struck the roof in quick metallic bursts. Beneath those sounds, something moved through the trees. Branches snapped one after another. The movement stopped below the stairs. A woman called my name. "Nathan, are you up there?" The voice belonged to Laura. I reached for the door. Elias caught my wrist. "She is at headquarters." The woman called again. I hurt my leg. My radio activated by itself. Laura's real voice came through static. "Nathan, confirm your position." The voice below laughed softly. Then it began climbing. The steps creaked beneath slow, deliberate weight. Elias turned off every lamp. "Do not let it see your face." A shadow passed beneath the door. Something knocked 3 times, waiting several seconds between each strike. "Nathan," my mother whispered from outside. She had died 7 years earlier. My hand moved toward the lock before Elias slapped it away. "That is how it learned me," he said. The voice changed. A child began crying. Then a man shouted for help farther down the ridge. Elias stood beside the window, listening. It moves through every voice people leave behind. "What is it?" I never saw all of it. The steps descended before dawn. No footprints surrounded the tower. Elias disappeared before sunrise, leaving warm coffee and a fresh entry in the lookout log. The handwriting described the storm and warned about a falling tree on my route. I followed his advice and avoided the collapse by minutes. At headquarters, Laura stared at me when I mentioned Elias. She opened an archive cabinet and removed a photograph dated 1971. Elias Mercer stood beside the same lookout. "He died there during a lightning storm," she said. "The strike set the cabin on fire." "That is impossible." Laura showed me a recovered logbook. New entries appeared every summer, always in Elias's handwriting. Search coordinator Samuel Price joined us. He admitted hikers sometimes reported voices near the ridge. "Those who obey the keeper usually return," he said. "Those who answer are found wandering miles away without boots, packs, or memory. Usually." Samuel looked down. "Some are never found." I returned with Laura the next day because my equipment remained inside the tower. Elias waited with coffee. He looked older. "You brought someone," he said. Laura could not see him. She only saw the cup floating beside the stove. At sunset, the radio died. Voices rose from the forest. Dozens this time. Missing hikers called from every direction. Some begged. Others laughed. Several used Laura's voice while she stood beside me. Then the tower stairs began creaking under many feet. Elias opened the logbook. A blank line waited beneath the date. "What happens if they reach us?" I asked. "The lookout must remain occupied." Laura stared at the moving pen. "You have been keeping them below." Elias shook his head. "I have been keeping the door closed." The windows filled with faces. Men, women, and children pressed against the glass from outside, although the tower stood high above the ground. Their mouths moved in silence while their fingers dragged across the panes. One face belonged to me. My double smiled and spoke through the radio. "Elias is tired." The tower shook. The old keeper placed the pen in my hand. Sign, and they stop. What does signing mean? You finish the shift. I understood why Elias had never left. The tower did not need a guard against wildfire. It needed someone to refuse the voices. Laura grabbed the emergency flare gun. When the door bent inward, she fired through the floor. Red light burst beneath the tower. For one instant, I saw figures covering the metal supports, climbing over one another without faces. Elias seized the logbook and threw it into the stove. The pages ignited. Every voice screamed at once. The sound struck the cabin with such force that the windows shattered outward. The figures fell from the tower and vanished before reaching the ground. Elias began fading with the smoke. Was that enough? I asked. He looked toward the dark forest. For tonight. The tower was dismantled months later. No remains were found beneath it. Laura left the service. Samuel refused to discuss the ridge again. I kept one page from the burned logbook. It was blank when I took it. Last night, new handwriting appeared across the paper. Elias had written that the tower was empty again. Then someone outside my apartment began climbing stairs that do not exist, calling my name in every voice I have ever trusted. Story 3. The first voice beneath the ground belonged to my dead sister. The last belonged to me, speaking with the exhaustion of a man who had been trapped there for decades. My name is Elias Mercer. I was 38 when I traveled to Blackwater Falls State Park in West Virginia to film a documentary about unexplained disappearances. I had spent 12 years producing wilderness investigations, most of them built around ordinary mistakes, bad weather, and human panic. I did not believe forests could remember people. A retired ranger named Harold Boone gave me the recording that brought me there. The tape had been made in 1976 by Ranger Samuel Pike, 3 days before he vanished near Blackwater Ridge. His voice emerged through layers of static. When the forest becomes silent, do not answer anything beneath the ground. It does not call with its own voice. My sound technician, Mara Collins, listened beside me. That sounds staged, she said. Harold did not smile. Samuel had no audience when he recorded it. We entered the forest before sunset with cameras, microphones, and climbing equipment. Rain had darkened the trunks, and mist drifted between hemlocks and pale ribbons. Water moved through distant ravines with a continuous low rush, while insects buzzed above the wet ferns. At 11:57, the frogs stopped. The insects followed. Then the wind disappeared. The silence arrived in layers until even the waterfall seemed impossibly far away. Mara stared at the sound meters. They are still detecting something. I put on my headphones. Dozens of voices whispered beneath us. Some prayed. Some cried. Most repeated names. Then a young woman said, "Elias, I am cold. My sister, Natalie, had drowned when I was 16. I removed the headphones. Her voice continued from beneath the soil. Please dig me out." Mara grabbed my arm. That is not her. The ground produced a soft, internal cracking sound. Leaves shifted without wind, revealing a narrow depression between two trees. We followed it into a hidden ravine. At the bottom stood a sinkhole wider than a house. Cold air rose from it, carrying the smell of mud, stone, and something sweetly rotten. My camera light revealed roots hanging into darkness. Human voices moved among them. Mara whispered, "We need to leave." Natalie called again. This time she used the nickname only she had known. I stepped closer. The edge collapsed. Mara caught my jacket, but the soil tore beneath both of us. We fell through roots and darkness. I landed on wet moss. Above me was a forest growing upside down. Black trees hung from a stone ceiling, their roots disappearing into rock. Leaves pointed downward, and pale streams flowed upward along the trunks before vanishing overhead. People moved between the trees. A ranger in an old uniform approached us. His face was young, although his clothing was stained and decayed. Samuel Pike? I asked. He looked uncertain. I think that was my name. Behind him stood missing hikers from different decades. None had aged. Some still carried cameras, maps, and backpacks that had rotted around them. A woman named Claire Dawson insisted she had arrived that morning. Park records later showed she had vanished in 1993. What keeps you here? Mara asked. Samuel pointed into the inverted forest. The voices make us answer. Every answer takes something. What? He struggled to speak. First the path home, then the year, then the people we loved. A child nearby repeated his own name as though practicing it. The forest whispered around us, not from one direction, but from every leaf and root. Natalie called me deeper. I followed before realizing Mara was no longer beside me. Her voice came from ahead. Elias, help me. Then the real Mara shouted from behind. Do not answer it. The trees began turning. Their trunks twisted slowly, producing deep wooden groans that traveled through the cavern. The trapped people stopped moving and faced me. Samuel seized my shoulder. It has chosen your voice. An elderly man stood between the inverted trees. He carried my camera. His face was mine, weathered by another lifetime. He silently formed 3 words. Do not return. Then he pointed upward. A narrow opening had appeared between the roots. Mara began climbing. The forest called her in her mother's voice. She covered her mouth and continued. I followed. Below us, every trapped person began calling my name. Their voices overlapped until they formed a single enormous whisper. At the top, Natalie spoke beside my ear. Elias, please answer me. I nearly did. Then I remembered the final day of her life. She had lost her voice after inhaling water. She could not have called my name. I climbed without speaking. Mara and I emerged beside the sinkhole moments before the ground sealed behind us. The forest sounds returned violently. Frogs called, insects shrilled, and wind shook water from the branches. We reached the ranger station before dawn. Our footage showed the ravine, the fall, and the upside-down forest. It also showed the elderly version of me following several feet behind us throughout the entire night. He appeared in places I had never noticed him. At the sinkhole, between the trees, standing behind Samuel Pike. In the final frame, he leaned toward the camera and silently warned me never to return. I released the documentary without that footage. Years passed. Then visitors began sending me recordings from Blackwater Ridge. The same old man appeared in the background of each one.